Early humans lived in a world that demanded constant attention. A world where every sound could mean safety or danger, where every shadow might hide food or a predator, where every day was a test of endurance. They were not the strongest animals, nor the fastest, nor the most heavily armed with natural weapons. They had no claws, no sharp fangs, no thick hides to protect them. What they had was each other, and slowly, over countless generations, they discovered that their survival depended not on the strength of the individual, but on the strength of the group. This realization was not sudden, but gradual, repeated in small acts of cooperation, in shared tasks, in mutual protection, until it became the very rhythm of their existence. At night, when the sun sank and the land grew dark, the dangers multiplied. The night belonged to predators, to the hunters of the shadows, to the creatures whose eyes glowed in the dark and whose movements were silent. For early humans, the night was a time of fear, but it was also a time of invention. They learned to gather together, to sit close, and to build fires. The fire was more than a tool. It was a shield, a symbol, and a source of comfort. The flames pushed back the darkness. The smoke carried upward like a signal of safety, and the crackling sound reminded them that they were not helpless. Around the fire, they sat in circles, some sleeping, some awake. And those who stayed awake carried the responsibility of the group. They listened for the sound of footsteps, for the growl of a predator, for the rustle of grass. They watched the shadows and guarded the sleepers. This practice of taking turns became a rhythm of life. It was not written down, not commanded, but understood. To sleep while another watched was to trust, and to watch while others slept was to protect. This trust was the foundation of community, and this protection was the beginning of society. During the day, survival required a different kind of cooperation. Food was always needed, and food was never easy to find. Fruits and roots could be gathered, but they were not always enough. Hunting larger animals required planning, courage, and unity. A single hunter could not succeed, but a group could. Some would chase, others would block, others would strike, and together they could bring down prey that none could face alone. Injuries were common, but when one fell, others lifted him. When one was weak, others carried his share. When one was hungry, others shared their portion. This was not only kindness, but necessity, for the group could not afford to lose members. Every person mattered, every hand was needed, and every life was valuable. To let one die was to weaken all, and to save one was to strengthen all. Thus, helping each other was not a choice, but a rule of survival. A rule written not in words, but in actions, repeated again and again until it became instinct. As humans moved across landscapes, following herds, searching for water, and seeking safer places, cooperation became even more important. Migration was not simple. It meant carrying children, carrying tools, carrying food, and carrying memories of where to go and where to avoid. The old could not walk as fast. The young could not walk as far, and so the strong carried the weak. They built simple stretchers. They shared the weight. They slowed their pace so that no one was left behind. To leave someone was to risk the group, for every person carried knowledge, every person carried skills, and every person carried stories. The group was not only bodies, but memory. And memory was survival. Tools became another way in which cooperation showed itself. A stone could be shaped into a blade, but shaping it required patience and skill. One person might be better at striking the stone, another better at binding it to wood, another better at using it in the hunt. Slowly, these tasks became shared. Knowledge of tool-making was passed from one to another, not kept secret, but given freely, because the survival of one depended on the survival of all. Fire, too, was shared. To keep fire alive was a responsibility, and when it went out, the group worked together to bring it back. Fire was not owned by one, but belonged to all, and in this way, it became a symbol of unity. Children were at the center of this cooperation. They were the most vulnerable, the most in need of protection, and yet they were also the future. To protect children was to protect the group's survival. Mothers cared for them, but others cared as well. Older children watched younger ones. Elders taught them. Hunters brought food for them. This shared responsibility meant that children grew not only with parents, but with a community. They learned by watching, by listening, by imitating. They learned to gather, to hunt, to make tools, to tell stories. In this way, knowledge was not lost, but carried forward. Seasons shaped life as well. In times of plenty, food was shared freely, and in times of scarcity, food was rationed carefully. The group endured hunger together, endured cold together, endured hardship together. To hoard was dangerous, for it weakened trust, and without trust, the group could not survive. And so, sharing became a rule, not written, but lived. It was repeated so often that it became part of human nature. Predators remained a threat, but humans learned to face them with courage, born of unity. A lion might be stronger than one man, but it was not stronger than many, armed with stones, sticks, and fire. Over time, predators began to avoid human groups, sensing the danger of approaching them. The balance of power shifted. Humans were no longer only the hunted, but also the hunters. This change did not happen in a single moment, but over countless generations, as cooperation grew stronger and predators grew more cautious. The memory of these struggles lived on in traditions, in rituals, and in the quiet rules of life. To starve food, to protect children, to respect elders. To guard the group at night, these were not written laws, but lived habits. They were passed down, not through documents, but through example, repeated until they became part of human nature. Thus, the story of early humans is not only a story of danger and survival, but also of care and community. They saved each other from predators, but more than that, they saved each other from loneliness, from weakness, and from despair. They discovered that strength lies not in isolation, but in unity, not in the individual, but in the group. This lesson, learned slowly and sometimes painfully, became the foundation of civilization. Even today, when we live in cities and no longer fear lions in the night, the echoes of those ancient fires remain. We still gather in groups. We still tell stories. We still trust others to watch while we rest. The habits of cooperation, born in the age of predators, continue to shape our lives. They remind us that humanity's greatest achievement was not the invention of tools or the discovery of fire, but the simple, steady decision to stand together. And so, when we look back at the long journey of our species, we see not only the dangers faced, but the quiet victories, won through patience, trust, and care. It is not a tale of sudden heroics, but of countless small acts, repeated over generations, that turned fragile beings into the most enduring species on Earth. This is the slow, steady, and perhaps even boring truth of history, that survival was not about one person alone, but about many people together, watching, helping, remembering, and enduring.